Hi everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and I am here to do a first impressions of Yggdrasil Norse Divination cards, reading the 9 worlds of Norse mythology. This is by a father and a daughter artist team. They are Icelandic. At least I know a little bit more about the father. The daughter seems to do a lot of different artistic type presentations and things of that nature, but this is all ink. Looks to be ink line drawing of some sort or another. Hakur Halderson, not sure how to say that correctly, and G Hawks, maybe Hawk's daughter. Again, I do not speak Icelandic at all, and I don't speak Old Norse. So this is definitely going to be a challenging, if you do speak Icelandic or Old Norse, and it's going to drive you insane. Make sure that you just maybe move to the cards and just watch it on mute. So I am going to give you a link below to a YouTube channel that I highly recommend, by a guy called Jackson Crawford. He is a professor of Old Norse. I think would technically be what he was a professor of, so maybe a linguist. And so he's a professor of that. If you are interested in Norse divination cards, if you are interested in the Norse pantheon, you should read the Poetic Edda, right? And his translation of the Poetic Edda is one of my favorites. I've had a few different ones. I've read a few different ones, but this is the one that I really enjoy, his translations of the Poetic Edda. So if you are coming to this video knowing nothing about Norse mythology, there are a lot of Norse mythology is in our cultural mindset, in a modern sense, mostly because of Thor and comic books, and these types of things. And so that's great because it's keeping those energies alive and well, and we're enjoying sort of new iterations of them, but they do get things wrong, right? So if you have mislearned that, say, Thor and Loki are brothers, they're not brothers. They have different parentages, but they do have very interesting storylines that interact and intersect. So there are definitely things that I think we assume that we know in a modern context, but they are it's misinformation, and so always be aware of those kinds of things. We only have very little textual basis for Norse myths, right? It was a verbal storytelling culture, which would pass down poems and stories in a verbal, as were most cultures until a certain point of publishing and writing and things of that nature. And so we really have 2 books that are the closest to source books, and they are one's a compilation. This is the closest to source material that you're going to get for Norse mythology. This is called the Poetic Edda, Stories of the Norse God and Heroes. This is a collection of poems that were transmitted orally, that were put down on paper anonymously. We don't know who compiled these, but they were put down on paper and compiled, like somebody like the Grimm's brothers going out and gathering up the stories and pulling them together. So it wasn't written, these didn't come in book form. These were individual stories that were just brought together and put into one place. Then we have a second book called the Prose Edda. That is not the same thing as the Poetic Edda, and sometimes people do confuse those as being written by the same person or being just 2 different versions of the same thing. The Prose Edda, which is also known as the Younger Edda because the Poetic is the older, that was sort of transcribed or discussed the stories, but written in prose and sort of talking about some of the same things, but it is not the same book. Again, they were both around the 1200s, or in the 1200s. But the Poetic Edda would be what we would consider the closest that we have to a source book. And of course, still, even with that, we have to understand this is far removed from these original tales, and is seen through still the lens of Christianity, to some degree, and so that always has to be factored in with Celtic or Norse tales and beliefs and structures. We have to take everything that we actually have, which is very little, and make sure we understand that we're seeing that through a lens of time, and we're also seeing that through a lens of Christianity coming into those areas. we're not gonna go into any further of a lesson, so I apologize. But my point is that if you are interested in the Norse pantheon and working with Norse mythology, I highly recommend that you pick up the Poetic Edda. There's a lot of different translations, so you can certainly find one that interests you. I can certainly personally recommend Jackson Crawford's. So where was I going with that? So I think that's my point. The other thing that I would actually recommend, and this is because I am a fan, I am a big fan of Neil Gaiman, and Neil Gaiman works some of the Norse mythology into his books, especially American Gods. If you've listened to, I know there's also a television show. I have not watched it all yet, but I've read the book many times. Oh,
said Loki.
You can hear him.
So
I have the Audible version of it, but this is Neil Gaiman recently, this year, or it might have been last year, came out with a book called Norse Mythology, where he reads. I just love to listen to Neil Gaiman narrate, and so he tells a lot of the stories of Norse mythology. So that is also a wonderful resource if you want to dip your toe into Norse mythology. Okay, enough of that. Now, this is my second time starting this because there are a couple issues that I had here, and I needed to take some time to sort them out. But I decided just to start fresh because it was just getting really mucky. Love the box. Let's just do, I'm kind of refreshing my brain to come back into this fresh. So I love the box. It's a new Llewellyn box with the magnetic closure. I love the color palette. It is black and white, which goes with the line work, and it has this really beautiful like Wedgwood blue that it highlights some of the text, and also the inside of the box has this beautiful wedgework. It's really sharp. I quite enjoy this. So the name of this again is Yggdrasil Norse Divination cards, which I already said. Father and daughter artists, Icelandic artists, and the guidebook is called Bifrost, which is again a guide to Yggdrasil. I'm just going to try to do this in brief because I do find this to be a real problem, and it's a pet peeve of mine, so I'm going to try not to harp on it, while at the same time trying to make sure that I'm clear about it, because maybe they'll fix this at some point. So this is a system, an oracle deck that has 81 cards in it. So there are 9 gods, goddesses, heroes, heroines that are in the each of the 9 worlds. So if you know anything about Norse mythology, we have Yggdrasil, which is the world tree, and there are 9 worlds that are placed in various, and you can find different descriptions of where people think they should be placed on the tree, but there are 9 worlds, and so there are 9 suits, one for each of the worlds, and then there are 9 personages within those suits. The difficulty becomes that the cards are not numbered, so there's no numbers to them. There is an insignia, a little tiny sort of icon that represents the world, which can be a little bit difficult to see in how small it is. Again, I don't have the best eyesight, but even with my glasses, I'm having to, some of them, really take a good look to try to figure out which one it is. So really what you mostly have to quickly identify is the name of the person or personage or god or goddess, whoever that might be. So, but they are split up in the book based off of the 9 worlds. Now, obviously, Odin would be very easy to associate with Asgard, but there are 9 worlds and 81 personages here, and knowing all of those quickly is probably not going to happen. And yet there is no listing here of all of the cards and what page to find them on. So if I draw a card such as Odin, and I don't know that Odin is part of the Asgard section, what I have to do is figure out what that insignia looks like, and then I need to go here. Sorry, I should have linked it to the order, and this is in order of the placement on the tree of the world. Find that and say, oh, okay, that kind of looks like that. So that's Asgard. Then go here, because this order of placement of 1 through 9 is not the same as the order of placement as the 1 through 9 of the chapters. So for example, if I picked a personage from Hell and think that's number 2, it's not the second chapter. The second chapter is Jotunheim. So it's the land of the giants. It's not Hell. So you have to figure out what it is, find it here, find it there, then go to the section where you then just have to flip through the 9 until you find the right one. It's just not very user-friendly for somebody actually using this deck. All that it takes to fix that, and this has been a problem in other decks, so this is not just this deck. I had to go through, I made this, and I thought, well, that's not even all that helpful. So this is just a spreadsheet that has the 9 realms in the order that they're in the book, with the different personages in those in the order that they're in the book. So it's not alphabetical, but I still then would have to search around and try to find it. And so then I just alphabetized the whole thing and taped it into the front of the book, so that if I pull Frigg, right, again, probably wouldn't be a huge stretch if you know Norse mythology to know that she's probably in Asgard, right? So that, I'm just these are a little bit obvious ones, but still, if you didn't know that, so then I just go down here and find it, and in fact, I put it as, or the spell checker changed it to Fig instead of Frigg, so I do need to fix that. But this just makes it a lot faster to draw a card and find it. So to me, it's a problem. If you want, if Llewellyn wants us to use their decks, right? We need to be able to draw cards and quickly access them, and that way we, especially in a deck like this, where we are actually talking about, there's probably, I have read a lot on Norse mythology. So I would say that I at least have a fairly solid grasp on Norse mythology, but not fantastic, but I would say that I have a decent. And I'm not going to know who all 81 of these people are. I might have heard of their names, but some of them are barely mentioned. We don't have that much of source, and so some of these could be just, we only know a very little bit, and we're kind of building stories out of what we think we know. I'm not going to, even me pulling some random person, I may not know who they are, and I'm certainly not going to be able to always guess exactly what world they were in. And so anybody who's coming to this fresh, which I think is great because it does give us some background for the person, gives us some nice keywords. We need to be able to quickly get there. I know, lots of conversation to say that that's an annoying pet peeve, but I do think it highlights not just this deck, but I think it highlights an issue that I have seen, and I just don't think it should be an issue that we're seeing in modern decks like this. It just shouldn't be an issue. Either number the cards so that I can find them, or alphabetize the book so that I can find them. One or the other, or give me an index so that I can, yes, you heard me right, find them. So there we go. Done with that. Okay, so get that out of the way, maybe a little more concisely than the first time around. So it has the box, again, fantastic. The other slight irritation was the cards were not in order. There were like chunks of them in order, but they were missing a couple of their suits. I put them in order of the 9 worlds, but they are not completely in order here. But, you know, we're going to shuffle them anyways. But if you're like me and you're doing reviews, it is a little bit like, oh, I wish they would just be correctly in order. Well, that's a minor quibble. It doesn't matter. Once you shuffle the cards once, they're all going back. It has a cardboard insert, but what I do like is that at least it seems pretty solid. And so there's not going to be cards slipping behind it, which is another pet peeve of mine, because I don't want to dig for cards out of the bottom of a box there, what this does not have. So the box I am really happy with. I think most of the publishers today have stepped up their game in terms of boxes, which is nice to see. Let me zoom in here a little bit. So we have a nice book here. It's about it is 208 pages long. These over here talks about the author, about him and his daughter. They're Icelandic artists living and working between Iceland, Denmark, and Germany. Both adhere to heathenry or asatru. I'm sure I'm saying that incorrectly, which is when people, that is not a term that was used back in olden times. It is actually a modern word, although I will say that Jackson Crawford does say it's actually a good word for what it is, but it is sort of an adherence to the old ways. As viewed by Icelandic Asatru, I should look that up. Halldórsson is one of the original members active in reviving the traditional Nordic mythology of Iceland in the 70s, and has devoted his art practices to Nordic and Northern European mythologies and folklore. Hauk's daughter grew up in heathendom, surrounded by folkloric illustrations, stories, poems, and nature. So it says, for the deck, father and daughter came together with Halldórsson's illustrations, their combined interpretations. Oh, I see. Okay. So the images are all Halldórsson's, but the daughter does the writing of the book. So there we have that. That's clear. I know she's an artist as well, but when I looked at her website, she didn't seem to be doing the same type of art at all. So I was kind of surprised when I looked at her website, but that makes more sense. So we have an introduction to the cards, as we often have, a pronunciation of Icelandic letters, because the book does give where going to make sense to do so. The sort of Old Norse version versus the Icelandic version. As I said, I do not speak Old Norse and I do not speak Icelandic. In all of the reading that I did with Norse mythology was in my head as a young person, and so I know that I do not pronounce these correctly. And so again, I will put a list, a link to Jackson Crawford's YouTube channel below. He's got some great guides on pronunciation. He's, great resource. Not anything to do with esoteric or religion. He even has a video about addressing the Asatru. And him not being that, but understanding what it is. It's quite interesting and clear. So yeah, it's a great resource for more of the scholastic vein of things, including, most importantly, pronunciation. But I am not an expert, and so if that is going to pain you, I would suggest that you walk away. Exercise your right to hit stop on the video. It talks about using the cards. It does talk about how there isn't a higher or lower like arcana or arena, they say, like say tarot, but there are ways in which the placement and things can affect things. So definitely would recommend taking a look at that before actually doing readings. Talks about the animal symbolism and what you can, you know, how you can use that and make that be, you know, personalize that for yourself. Talks about some important things like the circle, the history of creation, the elements in Nordic paganism, which is going to be similar. You'll see some similarities, but you'll also see some focus on certainly fire and ice there. The importance of the 9. So it's giving you at least importance of in the way that they might have seen directions. So it really does in a small format. They can't teach you everything there is to know about Norse mythology in the world of the ancient Norse in this little guidebook. But I do think it does a good job of setting the basic stage. Now this is another, for me, a bit of a fail. I don't like poster fold-outs whatsoever, but I do think this image needed to maybe be the size of the box, folded in half, because this is really hard to see. It has the 9 worlds and their symbols here, which I already talked about, are a little bit difficult to tell what they are when they're small, placed onto a very busy artwork. Now it's gorgeous, so I'm not at all saying that the artwork isn't gorgeous, but it is very difficult to see in this size, and so I had to go through and number it, and even numbering it I can't hardly see it, so I'm going to have to come up with something different. Now obviously if you're kind of familiar with where people tend to place the 9 worlds on the tree, you can kind of guess, right, that Asgard is up here, Midgard's going to be in the middle, Hell's going to be at the bottom, right? So you can kind of orient yourself there, and then you can start to get there, but it's very hard to see that, and so this is one instance in which I think that a poster, even a smallish poster, would have been better served, because this is not real useful. Talks about the placements here, and it has the order of the placement on the tree, with giving you a little bit of an idea of what to do with those realms, right? So Asgard, they have it, I believe, in the Icelandic version here. Asgard is the world of the gods, so that's important to know. It's located in the top branches, northeast, center on top. It represents in a reading the seeker's main aspiration, the questions for the card, the seeker's aspiration, creativity, expression, and renewal. So it gives you just a little blurb, and you get a little bit more later on for each of these, but I like that it gives you that key in of how could you use these particular realms, these different worlds here of the 9 worlds. It's just that this is not very helpful. So then we have a chapter. There's no spreads or anything like that other than this spread right here, which is going to be quite a large one with these larger cards. And now I can't find it. There we go. That's the only spread that's there. Now, then it goes into the chapter, so we get a little bit more. So we see, again, Asgard. Now we have the Icelandic version of it. Yggdrasil's location, which we saw before. The card position, so if you were using this as a position, what would that imply, which we already read. And then it goes into more detail about that particular realm, which is fantastic. And then there are 9 personages for each of these worlds. So you have a description of the world and what that might represent in a reading, as well as what are the basic understandings of that world. And then we have the 9 personages that they are working with a full image here. It's not the full size of the card, but it's a good size. It's a very generous size so that you can be reading this even after you've shuffled your cards and be able to see the image exactly as it is. I think that's fantastic. So it gives you the title, it gives you the keywords that are on the card itself, and then it gives you a description of that person, in this case Odin, and some keying you into some key information that would probably help you to see how to work with that energy. Now, if if you are going to dive into working with Odin, will you want more than this? Of course. You know, now you have to go forward and forth and find your own information, gather your books and things of that nature. This isn't, again, going to teach you everything you need, but I do think it's a great place. I did take a peek at some that I thought might be problematic, like Loki. And just to see, okay, are they going to list him as, you know, Thor's brother, which I didn't expect because they are Icelandic. But so 177 for Loki. So I did read through this, and I actually really like how they talked about Loki, and they explained the fact that, you know, there's a complicated relationship between Thor and Loki, but it is one that is kind of weaving in and out all the same, even though they are not siblings. So I did kind of peek at a couple just to see how they would treat them. I have not read this from cover to cover yet. I definitely intend to. But sometimes we don't have a lot of information. So I did want to point that out, and that is because we don't always know a lot, right? There will be people that I know, and I don't know if it's this one. I did actually turn to one of the dwarves, but I know that there are there's a particular dwarf that Odin mentions, but it's just literally like one line in the Poetic Edda, so we don't really know very much about them. So, for example, with this one, we just, and who knows, like these names, right? And so whoever this guy is guarding the treasure. So he is a dwarf who carries an oak shield for protection. He is a supporting entity offering protection for the seeker and serving as a guard for whatever is important to the seeker's question, depending on the cards around him in the spread. He reinforces what the seeker needs to guard and protect the spread, but most prominently guards aspirations in the professional world. So this really just talks. So I'm guessing all we know about this person is that he was a dwarf who carried an oak shield, right? And then so from there we're using it versus, say, Loki, as we were just talking about, where it goes into and I do really like how they don't just label him as evil, because he goes both ways. But it talks about how he relates to the various different personages in the stories and the things of that nature. So we locate him and sort of orient ourselves with him in the world of this pantheon. Whereas with that one, we don't have that much, because my guess is all we know is he was a dwarf named so-and-so and he carried a shield. So, but it does at least let us know how could we use that particular image, even though we don't know a lot. So how much information is here is going to be based on how involved they are in the myths of the Norse pantheon. But as I said, I actually really think that this does a good job syncing, doing a book, guidebook for a mythological source, and at least giving us that ability to orient how did this particular being interact with Norse mythology, with the overarching story interactions. So so that is the guidebook. So now we're going to go through the cards. Let's talk a little bit about cardstock. It is super thin. Thinner, I thought, well, maybe this is similar to the Rockpool Publishing, which is very thin but holds up really well. This is, I have riffle shuffled this deck to death and it's held up really well. This is even thinner than Rockpool Publishing. Now, I don't know that means it's going to be wretched, but it is what it is. The benefit or the plus side of it being so thin is that, of course, this is 81 cards, which could get really difficult to handle, but I'm guessing it's going to shuffle really well because of that. But it is very thin cardstock and it is glossy. So we're going to zoom in. I have these not in order, but I do have them in their settings of their worlds at least. So let me zoom in a little closer there. I do wish this was borderless or just less of a border, but we can't have, because these are very detailed drawings. But it's a good size. It is not you know, oracle size, but it's pretty big. And so I personally think even with it being line art, you can see the art quite well, which is great. Would I trim it? Probably no, because I love this back. And if I trimmed it, I would be trimming everything but this bottom. And then I think that's just going to look weird. And this back is really gorgeous. So I don't have any intentions of trimming this, unless maybe I see somebody else do it and I'm like, oh my goodness. But my intention is not. Okay, so here we go. So of course this first realm is to do with Asgard, which is the world of the gods. So here we have Odin for omniscience, wisdom, poetry, and language. We have Frigg for foresight, wisdom, and intuition. I also did read, sometimes Frigg and Freya get a little bit, they're a bit of an amalgamation, or they come across as a bit of an amalgamation. Are they the same one, just in different stories? You know, that type of stuff. There is sometimes some people that will mesh these together. And I think that they seem to do a great job in sort of working through that. Although there's not as much on Frigg in here as there is on Freya. She's one of the major goddesses of Asgard, second to none, but perhaps the goddess of love, Freya. Frigg is the wife of Odin and the mother of Baldur, so it kind of sets it. That talks about where she dwells, her animal, her abilities that she's known for. But you do have certainly more, a little bit more context with Freya as well. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. But look how beautiful this is. So it does even here talk about the fact that her animal is the falcon. We can see that there is a falcon here, which is really, really beautiful. So here we have Freya for love, fertility, and sexuality. Again, I really do think that they did a beautiful job in the write-up talking about the attempts to turn her into a witch in a negative connotation, to kind of reduce her down just to somebody who's taking a lot of lovers and sex and things. I feel like they've given a great understanding of the power of Freya, that half of the human beings who die are going to go to humans and the other half to Freya, and the other half to Odin. Like, she's so powerful in her own right, not just the wife of Odin, right? And so I think that they also do point out that she actually is one of the Vanir, so she would be in the world of the elves, but she does reside in Asgard, so obviously they have her here in Asgard. So again, I do think that the book is giving you a nice place to land. Again, I have not read it all yet, but my first impressions are that. Here we have Sif. This is Thor's wife. And it's an interesting image. It's probably one of my least favorites. I mean, she gets all her hair cut off by Loki, but I don't know. It's just kind of a little bit more modern image where I kind of like these a little more, that style a little bit more, but there we have it. Earth, fertility, and family. Here we have Baldur for forgiveness, mildness, and kindness. Most every mythology, folklore, or religion has a deity like Baldur, the virtuous but also vulnerable one, the one who perishes but transcends death and reappears with a new beginning. Yeah, I mean, I really am. I like the write-ups so far. Again, it's not going to tell you everything you need to know, but it's going to give you, or it's not going to tell you everything there is to know, but I think it's going to tell you what you might need to know to, again, just orient yourself into place. So, moving on, here we have Njord. Again, don't go with my pronunciations. We have Bragi here. We have Nana for steadfast and loyalty. They're beautiful images. We have Gersemi and Nos for treasure, beauty, and design. They are, let's see, two daughters of Freya and her beloved son, or her beloved husband Odin. Their names mean treasure and price. You can see there's some coins down here. It's just beautiful. So then that moves us to Jotunheim, which would be the world of the giants. And so I'm going to, I'm not going to, obviously, that we would be here forever if we tried to touch on all of these myths. For the most part so far, it's looking to me like, let me try to find his. We'll know with Tyr. Has the wolf in the background where he gives up, eventually he's going to give his arm up. So they do seem to me so far for the most part to be representation of them versus just random art that's put there. There's just probably some of them that have been maybe squeezed into a place and they're not. But for the most part, I'm not really seeing that. Skrimir, deception, undermining of confidence. Interesting with the rooster there. We have Mimir, omniscient advisor in a council. Again, this is the world, and I think that the name of saying the English word giant is a little bit of a misnomer. It does not mean that they are, some of them are, but doesn't mean that they're necessarily giants. And of course, the various races here interacted, intermarried, and had children in the stories as well. This is for creativity, novelty, and artistic struggle. Ran for intuition, subconscious, and currents. This is beautiful. Oh, look at that. Aegir, hospitality, abundance, and currents. Very Poseidonous. Of course, we see where they connected many of these things into the Roman gods as well. Pantheons did shift and intermingle as well, which is one of the fantastic things about mythology. But it has very much a feel of Poseidon. Let's look at this one, though, because we can see, was this a magnificent god of the ocean and friend to the Aesir. He is one of the pagan gods documented all the way back to ancient times. Ocean waves. The name Aegir means the sea giant and makes reference to his awesomeness. He is the important god to seafarers, and those who perish at sea neither go to Valhalla or to hell, but are gathered by Ran and put in Aegir's realm to stay there in the afterlife. It doesn't say anything here that he is associated with a trident. So whether or not this was an image of Poseidon that's now being used for this or not, I don't know. There's no way for me to be able to tell that. Again, the artist is Icelandic. This is what the focus of many of his art pieces are, is in these worlds of mythologies. And truthfully, in the end, as long as it sort of zones me into, it doesn't clash with what you would assume to be there for that particular person or personage, I'm okay with that. Again, we don't, there is no set image of what these gods and goddesses looked like. So no matter what, we're looking at supposition. And so as long as it flows with and feels like it works with what we know, I'm fine with that. So far, to me, it all feels like it fits well. Like, it almost looks like he is missing his hand here. I mean, technically to me, his hand's already been bit off by the giant wolf there, which is a sacrifice he made to try to catch him. He stepped forward and said, I will put my hand out into the jaw, right, so that they could be able to free him, and he sacrificed his hand, and so it looks like that's missing. So to me, that very much looks like Tyr. Here we have Thor. Not quite as good looking a Thor as we see in movies today. I love him on the head of the giant something that he is. Looks like a dragon or some kind he's on. Strength, fertility, and protection. We have a messenger and a diplomat. I do like the keywords. We do have the representation of Verdandi, which is the future. We are now also in another world. So we have entered into another world, which is the world of the light elves. You can kind of see where it looks like elven towers here. Of course, J.R.R. Tolkien got a lot of his, if not all of his references from Norse mythology, and so you will see many overlays there as well. But you can see the string here. Do you see that kind of winding through here? I'm going to pull that out for the rest of them to show up. Now, there are a couple. So here, they should all be right here. Okay, here's Urge. Oh, we'll hold them out. But you can see, like, look at her. She's got that thread as well, and it kind of goes off of for the present. And then this is going into the future, but we should have the one for the past as well. So we'll see when she comes up. Okay. Sorry, I know I'm skipping around here because I think I just need to put the guidebook down and say that I think so far it looks like a good, at least to be able to key you in on how to read the card in a reading. And I do think the keywords are doing a great work of that as well. And then also key you into how we might find them in the mythologies. So here we have the Keeper of Secrets. We have Gerd for artfulness. We have Vali for reconciliation. We have Soul for ambition and drive. Alfrin for feminine intellect. We have Frey, who of course is the twin brother of Freya, for spring and new beginnings. Now, so this is an actual place here. There are a couple that are not too many, that are actual places or concepts versus being actual people. So this is one of the springs that are under the roots of Yggdrasil, and it's the Fountain of Fate. And this is where, yeah, we're missing a Skald. We're missing Skald here, but she's, I'm sure, coming. This is where they would reside, and so we can see the three women under here. So we do have a few that are places, I'm going to put that out, versus people or beings. Here we have Frosty for mindfulness, lightness, and impermanence. We have this for reflection. Not even going to try to slaughter that name. I love Scotty here for ambition in the hunt. I mean, this is gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Ire for healing and medicine. Judgment and final decisions. Grimnir for balance of contraries. See the ice and the fire? I love this image too. For temperance. Let's look him up because he's got a couple animals. The forefather of a lineage of giants that were friendly to the Aesir. And he is the king. So he is the king of the world of Niflheim, which is the world of ice. He commands some of the forces of nature, particularly in relation to water, wind, fire, and ice. Those elements are his son, Carry the wind, Logi the flame, Hlir the sea, and Frosty the ice, and is the grandfather to Snare or Snow. And his three daughters bear three different names for snow. He has a snow falcon in his service, which we can see a falcon, a bird of some kind there. And he also consults a talking head. So there's the talking head there, much like Odin. Like anything ancient, will never be rushed. He represents understanding of the value of allowing some time to pass before making decisions or reacting. So I think that really works well with temperance. I like that image and card a lot. We have peace and counsel. Nifl for darkness and fog. Amla as the first human woman. So now we have descended to Midgard. We can see that by the kind of Viking ship that is here. And that's be the first human woman and the first human man represented there. The gateway, opportunity and warning. That's awesome. Forseti, fairness and judgment. Now this is the one I think that somebody had thought was Circe. And it does look more like that as a scorpion. Now this is Loki's wife, is what I'm trying to say. And you associate her with a snake. Where at first when I looked at this, I thought, well, maybe that's a snake, but that looks like a scorpion. Yeah, there's definitely nothing in this particular thing to tie her to a scorpion in a bowl versus a snake in a bowl. So here, for example, is an image of Circe, which this is very much so a recreation. Recreation of this. Now there's obviously some shifts and changes for artists, doing things a little bit differently, but it seems to me to be a representation of Circe that he is using for a representation of this particular goddess instead. Again, I wish there was like a snake here or something like that, just to bring it more closely in. We do have the idea of the cup and the poison. I can handle that. It's not my favorite thing, but I can handle it. Jarl and Erna, ambition and collaboration. Hlin, reassurance and protection. See how some of the artwork is a little bit more of a modern-esque type feel to it, whereas some, I do wish it was, personally, I wish it was all similar to this art style. Not so much that one. I do like this. I think it fits the deck really well. I'm not as big a fan as some that seem to be a little bit more like modern art, but it works. And again, this is from a body of work. Can you imagine? This is like a lifetime of work. Dog for clarity and novelty. Gefjon for claiming new ground. We have Gandalf here as one. We've moved to the realm of dwarves now from Midgard. And so here we have Gandalf for wisdom. We certainly know where Tolkien got that from. Brock for master craftsmanship and diligence. Delling for beauty and vanity. Here we have diligence and resourcefulness. How lovely is she? We talked about him guarding the treasure. Durin, the doorkeeper, and about navigation. There's Skald. Oh, here, I wanted to keep the other ones out, and I think I put them back in. Let's find them again. So I love these. I think these are really beautiful. There we have Erd. There we have Skald. And there we have Verdandi. The future. Wait, okay, shoot. These are the ones we've already looked at. I'm getting them mixed up. So here we have the three fates, right? And they would be under the Yggdrasil and in the roots, at the roots of the tree. But how gorgeous are these? I love these. Love, 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 love them. Okay, going back. Ambition and competitiveness. This is gorgeous. A sportsman, skier, hunter, and tracker. He definitely looks like a huntsman. He's got his bow. This is Scotty's husband. So it works for me. Is this exactly that person? I don't know, but it works very well with that image. Look at how beautiful that is. Magical youth and rejuvenation. Because we do see an apple here, so and she was the keeper of the apples for I'll say everlasting life, but eternal youth, right, to live forever here. And so we can see that. So to me, this is likely was drawn of her. Darad. So now we have shifted to the realm of the Dark Elves. I believe that's what that insignia would probably be. Yeah, so this is the world of the Dark Elves that we have shifted to. We have Mani, unresolved emotions. Oh, this is beautiful. This is more modern feeling too, but that's actually gorgeous. For transformation, we have Mock for bravery and lifting the nightmare. Sin for opportunity. Na for messenger of the gods. So then this is the rule of 3. So it's not an actual personages or single person, right, that we have. 3 brothers appear in the spread as the jury of decision making. They reach a decision according to the majority rule. A parallel is drawn between them and the 3 sisters of destiny or fate. The brothers are a lesser version. One does represent the past, the present, and the future, but combined together, they make decisions about the questions at hand. So it's like taking all of those in together to make your decision. I quite like that. Dari as the conflict behind the mask. Here we have what looks to be the same, similar. So the Dari manifests as the mask of the past and present conflicts worn in a variety of ways. One meaning of the word Dari is spear, and the card can indicate the influence of spears pointed at the seeker. So it's like a high pressure, there's a conflict going on behind this mask. So then this is Darad, the queen of the world of the Dark Elves. She will stay again with the Seeker and become part of them. Once you put on the mask, she is not easy to shed. She manifests as the mask of the past or present conflicts. Her name actually means conflict. So we have conflict behind the mask and suspense behind the mask. We do have a more male figure up here and a female figure up there to also remind you who would be the king and the queen of the elves. Okay, oh, this is beautiful. The known unknown. What a wonderful card to have in a deck, divination deck. Amrun is the dark elf knowledgeable in the dark elf runes, also known as moon runes. Amrun may have had a cult following in Sweden and has been an entity mostly of folklore. Moon runes are illegible to most, a system of writing runes similar to the Futhark alphabet, but written in such a way that they could only be read by the light of the moon. It is a secretive writing meant to stay hidden and meant for hidden messages. Some could be read by any moonlight, but it was possible to make the writing even more stealthy, only to be read on the same day of the year. Of course, you see this also in token, don't you? On the same day of the year, according to the moon calendars when they were written. That is awesome. I love it. And you have that big moon there in the back. You've got kind of what could be a full moon here. We've got a crescent moon there. Here we have Surt for the fiery wrath. We have now moved to the realm of fire. You can see there. Muspel for the Lord of Misfits. That's so interesting. Sinmara for nightmare. Look at how you have that wood burning type stove or something going on back there. Let's look her up. The searcher's wife. She is the personification of nightmare. Mara is the feeling of a heavy burden on the sleeper during a specific kind of nightmare, one where the sleeper is in the twilight of sleep. Oh, I hate that feeling. But has not regained control of their body. Yes, I do not like this. This nightmare is Sinmara calling on the seeker. Sinmara has access to humans through the twilight of sleep and wakefulness, particularly nightmares, any nightmares. Her name means a weight on the spirit and mind. Mara being the weight and Sin the mind or the spirit. Her presence in the spread signifies a worry that might have a paralyzing effect leading to anxiety. Interesting. Elmner, I'm sure, again, look away or plug your ears. The spirit of fire, course, here we have Loki, the cunning god of many faces. The crafty mead of poetry here. Now this is an actual ship. That is a gorgeous image, isn't it? So I started to pull things aside and now I have forgotten to. But you can see that most of these are all people or, you know, gods, goddesses, beings. This is a ship that is supposed to be made out of the toenails and fingernails of the dead. Definitely a ship of conflict. This is what's going to take the bad guys, depending on what side you're on, to the final battle in Ragnarok. Here we have the Spirit of Light. Now again, this is more modern, but I do quite love that. The Spirit of Lightning. The Berserker or the Warrior. I love the bear in the background. Here we have Midgard, perhaps. This is the guardian of the waypoint between life and death, which is right here, following. So there is that's another place as well. It's that crossing line. Knots. Look at how beautiful that is. Perpetual Desire. Hermit, the brave traveler. You can see him over here, over here. He's brave to be traveling in the nude. Interesting. Reconciliation of opposites. Ermin. Let's look him up. Sorry, I'm probably not looking up the ones that people are like, oh, look that one up. But it's more like, oh, I'm not familiar with that. Let's take a look. Or just to say, he represents the human attempt to reconnect and establish a connection between Hel and Asgard. The heathen people symbolically erected columns called Irminsular to try to connect the earth and the sky in a way to reconcile opposites. A column for Irmin was erected out of wood on a location in high altitude to try to establish a connection between the above and the below. So this represents a connection and reconciliation between seemingly irreconcilable differences, or contrary, sorry. So it's that, how do we reconcile opposites? That would be interesting in a spread. Here we have, of course, Hel. And she definitely has not, I mean, you have to look really close. Like, you know, Hel's face is kind of supposed to be half beautiful, you know, youthful, and then at the same time, be kind of disfigured and terrifying on the other side, right? Doesn't really talk too much about that. You can see a difference on the two sides. One does look darker and shadowed and maybe even a little bit rougher, but it's very, very vague if that's something that's going to bother you. And then we have two little, looks like trickstery kinds of, and one is tardiness and lethargy, and the other is sluggishness and procrastination. So these are definitely little beings from Hel that are not going to be helpful or useful for trying to get anything done. So there we wrap up with those. So, I'm sorry, I feel like this was probably a very convoluted, there's just a lot of cards, number one, for an oracle, and obviously a lot of room here because of all of the names to try to figure out how to pronounce them all. Very thin cardstock, very easy to shuffle, a little concerning as to how well they're going to hold up, but only... It's still, even with them, and that's the thing, as I can see why they would do it, because truthfully, even with the thinness, which makes it fairly thin, it's still a bit of a handful. And again, I don't think anybody needs to create a deck that is easy to riffle shuffle, right? But it's a bonus if you can. I'm sure this is made to overhand, but I like a good mix, folks, a good mix. Now, I am not going to try to do the 9 world spread here. It would not even begin to fit on this table. And I don't tend to do, I would probably do that for myself once. I'm going to give that a go, but it's not something I would do all the time. I would be more inclined to pull 3 cards. So here we have Amla, the very first human woman. Second, we have Ol for ambition and I do really like him. And then we have the future in the last position here. So we have, let's see what they talk about with Amla, the first woman. I really like that there is a first woman and the first man. And I'd be curious to see. Created from a trunk of wood found by Odin, Vili and V on the beach in Midgard. Odin gives her the breath of life. Vili animated her and gave her intelligence, and V speech, hearing, and sight, along with outward appearance. Her name suggests that she is made from the elm tree, which is a soft wood prized by artisan wood carvers for its beautiful and unusual markings. Amla is the proto-woman, and her significance in the spread is one of new life. This might be a new love, a new approach to something concerning the personal or private life, a renewed relationship with a loved one, or a new relationship with someone yet unknown to the seeker. So this is about new life, but it seems to be more connective. They seem to really be connecting this to friendship, a lover, even childbirth, which could not be for me because I don't even have a uterus. So this idea of a new relation coming, but we do have this figure or man here for ambition and competitiveness. Now, what I really like here is that I know that his wife, who I am, is it Scotty? I'm totally blanking, so please forgive me while I look it up. But my point is, while I do look it up, he and his wife have similar, I don't know why these are all the way up here. They have similar activities. They both are hunters. They both like to hunt. They are working together, enjoying the same things, these types of things. And so, sorry, I started to do it and I got sidetracked. 132. Scotty, yeah. Much like his wife Scotty. So they are both hunters and skiers who love the mountains and have a happy union. So we have this new beginnings in a relationship, or in even just a situation in which the key here is bringing together energies in the situation or peoples in the situation that enjoy the same things, right? That can really have that connection through that. That's what's really going to take this union happily into the future. Here. So, I mean, I really have high hopes for this. I'm really enjoyed, even more so than seeing who the people and beings that are populating this. I love some of the keywords that are present here. I feel like it's going to give a very interesting and nuanced reading with some different keywords than we're really used to seeing show up over and over again in different oracle decks. So I actually have high hopes for this. It certainly far outweighs many Norse. There's not many, as I don't think I said because I redid this, but there aren't a lot of decks that are Norse based, and of that small amount, there are not many. And I can only think of one that I've seen people really love this particular, I don't know if it was, I think it was called the Norse Tarot, that is out of print that you can't get. It's something, I keep an eye out for. But other than that, there's not a lot that I would see people recommending. Blue Angel has a Viking oracle out, but it is a chunk of it is the runes themselves, which this would be great to just cast runes along with. And I actually have a black set on black stone that would go amazing with this, which is definitely something I intend to combine. That deck, it has, I've looked at it a couple times and it just, to me, has got some problems. So that one is not something that I personally had any desire to purchase, whereas this I am excited to be able to work with, get to know some of these that I haven't heard of, or maybe just heard in passing but don't know much about them. Still really love that one. And again, like I said, just from this cursory look at first impressions, I quite like I have hopes that it's going to make for some interesting reading with the keywords that are there. So we shall see, right? We shall see. But there you can at least get a look at it and see if it's something that you're interested in. I think it's still showing as pre-order for Amazon, but I picked it up at Barnes & Noble's, and I know that Queen Osset, who's Oya's girl here on YouTube, she has a shop, and it sounds like brick and mortar get them first, perhaps, because I know that they have them at their shop. So and somebody else I saw on Instagram had picked it up and found it at a Barnes and Nobles. So you can find them in some actual physical stores, and I don't think it's too long. Like it may even, by the time I get this up, it may be available in Amazon. So check it out. It's not too far out from coming to all places. So if this is something that interests you, on first glance, despite the nits and picks, I'm excited to work with it. I will probably sit down and read through the whole book before I get really started, but I'm excited to check it out. So I hope this was enjoyable to you, and I will see you later.